Good morning, everyone. This is Tabitha Tarpley. I am the daughter of Scott Tarpley. I have been honored to be able to work with Scott for a little over 20 years now. I've been in every aspect of the business. Now, I help manage mobilization to and from CAT events and help with a lot of the behind the scene tasks during these CAT events that help make things run smoother. So today, I am honored I'm going to be able to share some of these secrets with you to help you too. So let's get started talking about mobilizing to and working a CAT event. I have helped mobilize up to 124 tractor-trailer truckloads at once to a major CAT event, and I helped mobilize them to every major CAT event in the U.S. during the last 2 decades for disaster equipment and the drying team. I will share what you need to know for mobilizing to these events, including the risk and the rewards. Now, when I'm talking about CAT events, what I mean by is any major naturally occurring event with a given measurement period that affects the area and the people within it, such as a hurricane, windstorm, tropical storm, typhoon, cyclone, earthquake, a sea quake, wildfire, a severe thunderstorm, winter storm, flood, volcanic eruption, and things of this nature. And of course, there are two ways to look at a CAT event. There's the yes, let's go make money, and then there's the I declare bankruptcy. Because yes, CAT events is usually very costly on the front end side, but it does have the potential to make huge rewards on the back end side. So, do you like gambling? If so, let's spin the wheel. CAT events are often a lot like gambling. It's not like mobilizing for a large loss where you already have your contract signed, your mobilization contract signed, and everything is a go. This is much like mobilizing and going in blind. Most of your jobs are obtained by who you know, boots on the ground, and that you're already there and ready to respond quickly. And therefore, most all your decisions become a gamble. So, will you win or will you lose? Now, before you decide that you 110% want to mobilize and work a CAT event, here are a few quick things that you should know before you go. One is that there are usually no credit card machines, at least for a week, as most stores will be operating on generators, limited power, and usually no data services. You will have to take any and all your needed medication that you need for at least a week. It's usually a good idea to take more. Um, and gas and fuel of all sorts is hard to come by. So propane, um, gas, diesel, things like that are very hard to come by, especially with people fleeing the area and then coming back and no power. Also, make sure to take and that you're willing to eat canned food items that are ready to eat of some sort for at least 3 days. Be prepared for the smell in the area. There's something about a cat event area, it stinks. Also, be prepared for seeing mass destruction and possibly even some bodies. Yes, we saw them in Katrina. Some of them were being pulled out of the rubble that we were working in buildings around. Some of them were being shot because they were looting, and they literally zip them up in a body bag and throw them into a reefer trailer. So if you are not prepared, this would not be a type of work for you. I know that we have already talked about mobilization some in some previous webinars that we have done, but I want to be able to mention how it's a little different to mobilize to a CAT event. First off, unlike normally, you have to prepare transport and employees for what they may see. You're going to see mass destruction. A lot of roads may be blocked. You're going to see paintings on the buildings, usually where they have came in and searched the buildings, and if they found anyone inside that needs to be removed, etc. they will paint that on the buildings. Usually it's a circle with the X, and one of the numbers represents the number of bodies found inside. You will see people and volunteers hauling off bodies in the body bags and throw them in the reapers. And of course, you will see looters. You will potentially see a looter get shot, and you will see signs. And looting means you can't even pick up a piece of trash in the trash pile. You might get shot. So make sure you and your employees know what it means to be a looter. Doesn't matter if it's trash or not. If it's not yours, you can't touch it. The smell is also really awful in these areas. Um, and in Katrina, everyone developed pretty much what they call the Katrina cough. And most of us had that cough for over 6 months. So be prepared for that as well. So now that you think that you want to mobilize and you're going to mobilize, let's talk about when you should mobilize and why it matters. So let's say a Cat 3 hurricane is spinning in the Gulf and it is going to hit in 4 days. When do you mobilize? Let's put it this way. We usually mobilize pretty close to the area that's being hit, such as if a hurricane is coming in, we mobilize right outside the storm, and as soon as the storm passes that area, we move on in so that we're just a few hours out. Why this matters: if you wait till a few days after a storm hits, then people with contracts, government contracts, or things of that nature are already on the ground waiting to grab those jobs to say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to respond, we're going to protect your building. A lot of people cannot maintain those contracts during big cat events, already swamped with work, etc. Or maybe it's multiple contract or events happening back to back and they're not responding timely. So if you're already there and knocking on doors, then you have the chance to get those jobs as well. Also, if you wait, the military, government, things like that will shut down a lot of these roadways and um, control the people coming in and out. And that can be very hard to make it get in and out with all your employees. Okay, let's talk about the weather hazards. Just a little rain, right? So, if you move in too close to the hit area, you could experience some really bad weather. You need to be able to stay close and safe, but not too far out. So, Key West and Mexico City Beach were pretty much on lockdown by the military. If you weren't there by a certain date and time to get the early entrance with military escort, it was like a whole nother week before you could get in. So, make sure that you are there and ready. These road hazards and road closures and trouble getting in are going to start for miles out. So if you're not in a close vicinity, you may not be able to get in. Road hazards, such as in the middle, like Katrina, there's just devastation everywhere on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, are examples of the flooding during the Houston floods about 2 years ago. Closed down interstates and affected a lot of major travel. Also, this just backs up for days and days and days, and then you add in contractors coming in, people trying to get back home, things of that nature. The traffic gets really, really bad after this too. So always make sure you have extra tires and things like that to be able to get there. And just make sure that you're as close as you can be without being in harm's way so that you can be like the first with the boots on the ground to be able to secure jobs and be able to get those jobs, whereas other people may get, stuck behind. In Houston, actually, Scott actually got down there before the rain had quit, and it started flooding at his hotel, and the water was actually coming in the first floor. The water started rising on the semi out in the parking lot, and so he was kind of trapped there for a few days. So sadly, sometimes that happens. He just wasn't at the right place at the right time. Luckily, our other drivers were not directly in Houston and could work around those road hazards and were able to set up some jobs. And thank goodness Dad had some food with him because because that's always the rule. Take several days of food and water, because there was no way to leave that hotel with a flood completely surrounding it to be able to go get food or water. Um, Also, I wanted to mention the Florida Keys about 2 years ago, when it was shut down, and not allowing even residences in, only contractors. You had to have the pre-approval paperwork and passes and military escort into that, before they even opened it up to the regular contractors a week later, and then residences a week later. And I think it was like another week before they opened it up to the public. Um, that was actually ended up being some very simple, like one-page paperwork, to prove why you needed to be there. Um, so make some phone calls in the area wherever the storm hits. Do some research online of where to get that paperwork, to get your FEMA pass to get in. So now you have to ask yourself, do you have the willing employees or drivers to be able to get your equipment there and work the storm? Some employees that have never done that are not going to want to do this. Some are going to think that they're going to want to do this and get down there and say, this is not for me, I need to go home. You have to be able to warn your drivers that they're usually going to have to go in a little earlier and stay longer than normal delivery. It's emotionally hard, it's long hours, the living conditions for the first few days are usually very stressful, especially with no power. You can't run down the street to a restaurant to eat. Another difference with mobilizing to a CAT event is that there's usually issues with vendor transport. So these vendors are usually um, wrapped up with government contracts during state of emergencies. Also, a lot of vendors don't like to mobilize during dangerous situations. So you're going to have to know your vendor and have good discussions and a good contract with them for whenever a storm hits and that you do need their services, that they're going to be able to come through with those services. Also, the length of time that the vendors may need to be able to stay before they can drop the equipment off somewhere may be a few days. So have that discussion with your transport team and see what can be done about it. You also have to decide how much to mobilize. Mobilizing too little can cost you a lot of business. Mobilizing too much can cost you a lot of money. So you're going to have to rely on how many people you know in the area and how much work you think you can get. Also, how many drivers do you have available? Excuse me. One of our bigger issues, of course, with bringing in multiple semis is equipment staging. And I don't care if you have just 2 or 3 trailers, a mobile home, etc. with you, or if you have hundreds of trailers. Equipment staging is usually an issue for most every contractor mobilizing to a storm. So once the storm has passed, you may think it may be simple to find a place to park the trailers. But if you haven't necessarily secured a job site with a big enough parking lot that they're allowing that, then what are you going to do with the rest of your stuff? So a lot of commercial places won't allow you to stage extra equipment on their property because they're always worried about the liability damages. They're worried about damages to the parking lot, etc. Or those parking lots may soon be taken over by electric trucks. Um, so make sure you know where you are going. Sometimes this can be a little hard to do it ahead of time because if the storm shifts just a little bit, like in a hurricane, you may not be close enough now, or you may be, in harm's way, etc., or it may have damaged the parking lot that you were going to stage in. We had that happen before. All the light poles and trees and stuff just pretty much damaged the asphalt when it was coming down, etc. So now you have no place to go. Make sure wherever you do find a place to stage ahead of the storm that it's not necessarily in a flood zone. You do not want to take the trucks there ahead of time because of the wind. Um, that might knock them over. If there is still some wind or another storm, like double storms coming in and trucks are still there, make sure they are pointed towards the wind. not where the sides will be taking the blunt of the wind. Um, because if they take the blunt of the wind, you're going to have your equipment turned over. So this picture here on the left was actually our staging yard in Houston, and it was not fun. And how do you find the staging yard? Well, we went through a realtor. Okay, so we found a lot to rent. They said it had a gravel base underneath the grass. It did not. So it kept raining in Houston off and on a lot after that storm passed. So we ended up being in a huge mud pit, little 1 acre lot, all these semis trying to come in and out and turn around, very narrow. Ended up having to pour thousands and thousands of dollars of gravel, um, and have the machines out there just basically scooping up mud. And then when we left, we ended up having to refix the landscape and resow grass, etc. Sometimes you have to be able to think outside the box a little bit to make it work. But it was literally very hard to find a place. So yeah, sometimes using a realtor, they know places that may be up for sale or that people are willing to rent lots, um, etc., and that can help you out with your staging yard if you need one larger. Okay, so most of the time when these cat events hit, you're going to hear that the state or the area is under state of emergency. So what does this mean and how does it affect your mobilization? And could it affect employee safety? So a state of emergency is pretty much when the government declares a state of emergency, um, in which this will help lift a lot of the guidelines and restrictions on motor carriers and operators of commercial motor vehicles. Because they are providing emergency relief, has to be directly to support the state or local efforts to save lives or property and to protect the public health or safety. So when this is done, your hours of service are lifted, and pretty much people can run however they need to. And there is no need to provide proof necessarily. There's no magic form that they give you to prove that you are providing those services directly. But should your driver get stopped, they do need to be able to explain, um, how they meet the state of emergency criteria for whatever they're doing. This helps with mobilization during a state of emergency, but can also hurt it at the same time. It helps you because if you have willing employees to get your equipment and vehicles there, they're not under those same guidelines that they normally would be. However, it can hurt because under state of emergency, vendors are usually already working their butts off and doing what they can to get stuff everywhere, and people are tired and they just may not, therefore have exhausted all their people during that time, and you may find it hard to get help. If you're considering working cat events, make sure you know your licensing requirements. Some states, such as Oklahoma, do not require a general contractor's license on a state level. Other states do, however, and some of these states are very strict, such as Florida and Louisiana. So ensure you know the laws and requirements and have them ahead of time. Not having a business license can be very serious. While you may not be thrown behind bars, the consequences of having a business license illegally or running one illegally in some states, such as Florida, can still be severe and costly. You could face heavy fines, fees, lawsuits, and penalties for operating without a license. That could mean your business is bankrupt by a simple lawsuit. So do your research and get your license in ahead of time. In some states, you may be able to work as a subcontractor under another company that is local. So this may mean that you'll be covered without having to get your license. Okay, so no power doesn't sound too bad at first, does it? I mean, we can all live without a little power for a little bit, right? But let's think about this from a business and safety standpoint. So when there's no power in an area for a few days or a week, or in some cases, like right now, Lake Charles, some areas are like 4, 5, 6 weeks without getting power. Um, this can mean some major logistic issues with business, for your business, and for your employee safety. It affects being able to get fuel for your trucks or for your equipment for jobs. It affects being able to get hotels. It affects, your to be able to get food, if restaurants are open, etc. It definitely affects safety majorly. And curfews usually will go into place because of this. So, no power over extended period of time usually means militia law, curfews, looting, and security issues that go along with that. So, make sure when you're going to be on the road or have employees on the road that they have their MREs, some canned foods, snacks, and water, water, water. And did I mention water? Now, food may not sound too bad, but make sure you have enough food for at least 3 to 5 days. Usually, after that, you have food trucks coming into the area. The grocery stores are usually running on generator or under a government contract of some sort where the government's helping them get back up and going and have supply trucks coming in and serving people. The Red Cross is usually there handing out food. Um, Churches, we usually have grills powered up by then and, have people going to get meat and stuff from outside the area and bringing it in and feeding people. So at least 3 to 5 days have plenty of food and water and be prepared. Now, housing in cat events is usually a major issue. Definitely was in Katrina. We had temp labor, as sad as it was, in tents. Now, it's a long time ago, but we had campers everywhere, tents everywhere. And hotels and stuff were just dang near impossible to come by. There's so many people displaced, eating up the hotel rooms, government officials taking up what was left, um, on top of what already wasn't damaged. It was very, very, very hard to come by housing. So make sure you have a plan ahead of time. I know in Lake Charles going on right now, people are having to drive over an hour and 10 minutes, a normal drive hour and 10 minutes. Until about a few days ago, that drive has been taken over 2.5 to 3 hours because of the influx of people and contractors coming back into the area and traveling back and forth working that would normally just be in that area and not having to travel. And some of the road closures around the I-10 area. So campers can be a great alternative if you have a place to put them. And you'll need a way, of course, to keep them serviced and powered and fueled. So make sure you have your fuel tanks and that you're legal with those, um, and be able to have a way to keep them serviced with water, etc. We usually have an extra large water tank that we can put on the back of one of the flatbed trucks, and they can get that tank filled at a truck stop or a fire department locally. There's now even one of the major fueling companies that deliver fuels that also now delivers water that you can put in your campers, and they can make routes and keep those serviced for you. So just have a plan and do it ahead of time because a lot of those vendors get eat up with people that they already have contracts with. Um, so if you need help and ideas with that, let me know and we can help you out with that. Okay, so fuel, even just for your trucks, can be a major issue in cat areas. Um, Partly due to the power, partly due to, people fleeing the area or coming back in or stocking up for their own generators and having trouble getting the trucks in to refill the gas station tanks and stuff that are there. So I can't stress this enough that fuel can be an issue. No credit cards can also be an issue when you do find fuel. You may have to be paying cash. Um, so make sure that you're ready for that. You have the fuel and extra tanks that you need upon your arrival. You fill up your trucks before you get into the area. You'll see a lot of these contractors have the fuel tanks in the back of their trucks, etc., to be able to run fuel back and forth. And make sure you also have your vendor set up, especially if you're running large generators, the desiccants, or just have a lot of trucks on the ground, where they can come in and fill your portable fuel tanks so that you can keep your trucks and equipment fueled. Um, that will help you out greatly. So here's another dilemma that we face during a lot of storms is no cell phone service. Okay, when Michael hit, there was none for over a week, and then finally AT&T cell phone service started working. It was the very basic service with no data. So once you got into Panama City area, you couldn't work your GPS or anything like that. That was based on the internet on your phone, and we're talking like for a whole hour worth of driving radius. Okay, so not just in the city. So this can be a major issue when you're trying to communicate with your drivers or people on the jobs, etc., about where they're at, what needs to be done, and communicating needs, and being able to communicate with clients if you're in that area without the cell service. Um, when the AT&T cell phone started working, uh, during Hurricane Michael, and we were a Verizon-based business, so we actually had to go get a bunch of burner phones. Well, we thought we were going to anyway, and then every place that had they have these portable trailers moved in. AT&T did amazing about selling, phones, etc. You couldn't get them. You could drive for 3 hours one way, and you couldn't get them. Everybody done figured out AT&T's working, Verizon, and no one else is, so everyone needs an AT&T phone. Um, so keep that in mind ahead of the storm and what you need to do, or um, if someone needs to be at the home office and bring them down, or if you have a mix of the AT&T versus Verizon. But I'm gonna tell you, for 2 years in a row, 3 years probably in a row now, AT&T has kicked butt as far as storm service and getting the sales back up and going, whereas the other services have been pretty slow. Might want to consider having the GPS systems in the trucks that work on satellite and not the cell phone data. And some contractors actually also have a satellite phone in case they need it. The AT&T hotspots are also great to have, so you're not paying all the time for the AT&T service on a phone if you're a Verizon-based business. And that way, any phone can hook into those hotspots as you're traveling down the road or in those hard hit areas, and be able to have some data service if you need it. Also, if you're on a job site such as a hotel, church, things of that nature, in the hard hit areas where the cell phone isn't working and you're needing to communicate regularly back and forth with your team, keep in mind that you get like the big military grade walkie-talkies that have the real long span. Those work amazing in every storm. In fact, we use them every storm. We use them running down the road. If two or more people in different vehicles running down the road, going to a cat event, they have the walkie-talkies. So make sure you have a way to be able to keep those charged, and that will not only be time consuming on labor trying to track down other people on a job site, but it is just just a lifesaver all the way around as far as communication goes, to be able to have those walkie-talkies. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about militia law and some of the issues with militia law, and I'll tell you a little bit about the scary situation I got into personally with militia law back in Hurricane Katrina in 2005. So militia law, you're thinking no big deal, right? Militia law, they can actually even deny you access to your job site without your proper paperwork, okay? So make sure you have that. Um, they have also been known to confiscate equipment, especially generators and fuel, okay? Especially without proper paperwork of where it's going and how you're using it. If you have long drives to and from, excuse me, okay, so if you have long drives to and from your jobs because of housing issues, etc., with the curfews and militia law, it may make getting to and from your jobs and actually getting any work done very, very difficult. Um, Also, what are you going to do about your equipment that's staged outside or inside a building during militia law, curfews, um, and no power? So I'm going to tell you about when Hurricane Katrina hit and we were at a courthouse doing work. Anytime after dark or after curfew that we came outside, we had to have a certain color shirt on if we were checking equipment or fueling whatever needed to be done, in order that we would not get shot. There were gunmen, snipers on the building and surrounding the grounds because the building was not very secure with all the desk tubing going through the windows and things like that. And the things that were inside this building, they could not allow looters or anybody into, um, to protect it and the privacy and the records. So in the middle of the night one night, I got up and wanted a drink, and the drink I wanted was in the cooler outside, and not thinking, I opened up the door because it's like the first night there and went to get a drink outside the cooler, which was at my camper that was on this like closed in place. I'm thinking I'm going to be okay with the temporary fence up and the militia wall. And all of a sudden, I look down and I have like 6 red dots on my shirt. And I immediately just put my hands up and started backing up. And it was just a whole big fiasco because they came down and explained how I almost got shot, and they were trying to figure out what I was doing and how that pulled their attention away from other things. So it's very, very, very serious that if you're on a job site that is being protected like that, everyone obeys the rules and knows the consequences because it could have been very, very, very bad. Um, I think I've already mentioned about Katrina and all the sandbags and the looters getting shot and all the things that you didn't see on TV. Usually, I know the media overplays everything, but Katrina was very underplayed as far as what we could actually see with our real own eyes. Um, so be very aware of the critical circumstances of militia law and everything that goes around with it. So make sure your employees and you are willing to mobilize through that, to work in that, and that you have the paperwork that you need to get through roadblocks. Some military roadblocks are easy to get through, and I'm going to explain that here in a little bit, and some are not. So we'll make sure that you are prepared. Okay, so there are some areas such as the Florida Keys, Mexico City Beach, etc., that are closed even to people that live there, right? So how do contractors get in? 9 times out of 10, all you need is the FEMA, um, is stating FEMA relief, and the state seal on your dash can be printed out on a piece of paper. So that is the biggest, hugest secret probably ever, that it's not anything magical, to be able to get in. Now, you do need to be registered with FEMA, and that's a quick process on their website. So don't forget that. Um, Most of the time, that is all you need. Sometimes, if you're on higher um, jobs, such as prestigious courthouses, things like that, you might have to have a letter to be able to get in and out of those that are going to be closed off. And they will be able to provide that for you once they hire you, and that you keep with you and your employees that will be on that job site, or anyone coming in transport with you. Okay, so I know we talk about employee safety, but you also got to keep your job site and your equipment safe. So a lot of times when there's no power, etc., and you're going to have the looters, you are going to need temporary fencing around a lot of your job sites. You're running these desk and tubings in through windows, you're running in through doors, etc. You're making the place vulnerable, making yourself vulnerable, security systems are down, etc. A lot of times, they even need us to have a security guard on site to watch the equipment or for looters. Now, this is not saying that we want the security guard shooting at someone that's going to try to break in, but that security guard knows that it would be their responsibility to kind of sit back and notify the authorities if someone is there trying to get in. Um, Most of the time, people tend to stay away once they see security is on site. Make sure the area is staying well lit, to help deter any bad activity going on. Now, all of this being said, and I know working storms can be a great thing, but you can't have everyone that works for you leave and leave home base uncovered. So, if you have, a good work flow coming in at your home base, make sure to have it covered. You have loyal customers, people such as plumbers, etc., that refer you work. Um, if you are not there to take care of them, that work is going to go elsewhere, and that starts new relationships for them. That's going to make it even harder for you to work and get those relationships back once you get back, because they're going to feel a little neglected, okay? And they're going to worry about that happening again. So they're going to want to stick with someone that isn't doing that. So make sure with whoever goes to the storm that you are not leaving home base uncovered. Always protect your home base. Storm should be the gravy on the biscuit, so to speak, not the biscuit itself. So during the storms, also I want you to consider having a mobile command center or an area that acts as one, such as a hotel room, an RV, a, a container that you have set up as a temporary office, um, whatever may warrant depending on your work size, etc. This mobile command center needs to have a staff member that helps with vendor communications, housing for your employees and temporary staff, food for everyone, employee rotation schedules, and the like. It will also needs to serve as a daily basis for putting your billing and documentation together and for your safety meetings. Ensure any of the apps that you are using for your billing and documentation that are internet based, that they will also still take the data and hold the data while you have no internet until you have internet to back those up as well. So if your techs are on the job site documenting pictures and whatever your normal system is, that you're going to be able to have that data and retain it even when there's no internet. Because nothing would be worse than getting in the middle of the storm and realizing what you normally do is no longer working. During the stress of all the storm and the hustle and the bustle, now you're trying to figure out a new system. Okay, now let's talk about emotions for a moment. Employees are going to get stressed working out of time, or out of town, I'm sorry. Um, they are away from their families, their kids, their normal routines and schedules. They're usually working a lot longer hours. The food and living conditions usually aren't too ideal. You know, they may be in campers with other people, not a lot of privacy, um, and things of that nature. So keep in mind that emotions are going to play a little more or a lot more than normal. Um, and keep in mind, we have noticed time over and time over again that this magic amount of the number amount of time out of town is 2 weeks. At the 2 week mark, that is when you're going to usually start seeing that big drastic change in emotions of I need to get home, I need to get home. Um, it hasn't ever mattered. Doesn't matter how much necessarily you pay them for tap pay or extra or per diem. Nothing replaces their family and kids. So be prepared for that, and how do you work around that so that you keep everyone happy and your business moving and making money while you can. Especially during circumstances like Lake Charles, when storms hit 4 or 5 weeks apart, and it's like the whole process starts all over. The affected areas, buildings that you just dried that are only tarped, couldn't withstand all that wind, so now they're re-wet, so now your employees are out of town even longer again. So keep that in mind when you're doing storm work, is how are you going to deal with emotions? How are you going to rotate people in and out without it costing you a lot of money and logistics and downtime on jobs, or you got to keep your jobs flowing smoothly. So how are you going to do that? One way to help is to use temporary labor, and temporary labor helps with a lot of things, not just that. So why use temp labor? Well, you want each team member that you have that is certified, you want to be able to use them to lead the team, the temporary labor. You don't want to waste their time hauling DUs in and out of trucks and wearing them out or doing unspecialized tasks. So you're going to have your more qualified lead techs out locking down jobs and supervising these teams and doing all the physically demanding jobs. You also are going to want to hire these temp teams to wash your equipment, to load trucks, keep the trucks washed and looking nice, um, to make box lunches for your employees that are out on the jobs. Can also be used to help split the staff into different shifts. There are a number of things that you can do to improve, uh, the work demands of your full-time in-house employees with using the temp labor. Also, another reason to use the temp labor is that vendor accounts can usually be set up with longer payment terms than if you were paying them as a full house or as an in-house full-time employee. So, payrolls every week for some companies, every 2 weeks for others, etc. You have to pay them their labor no matter what. Whereas if you have, depending on your vendor account terms with the temp labor, sometimes those are a month or 6 weeks or 2 months out before you have to pay them. And so a lot of times that lets you get your billing and collection process going and start getting some of that cut money in before you're having to dig too deep into your pockets to have to pay out. Also with temp labor, make sure you have a fast and accurate way of tracking time. That will help out with your billing as well, and to help keep everything flowing smooth and quick. Okay, so equipment needs. There can be a lot of extra equipment needed to handle cat losses, especially since you need to keep home base protected. Um, so what we always recommend is always consider renting equipment during cat events as much as you can. You're not having to worry about staging this way. You're not having to worry about uh, having to throw out so much money up front with buying the extra equipment that you may not need outside of cat events, um, etc. You're not having to worry about maintenance and loading and unloading it. So if you rent the equipment, depending on the vendor that you use, usually rent what you need per job to every job. So it's great. You're keeping the work demand off your employees. It's still at rental rates, or should be at rental rates, that you're still making a lot of money. Um, and it makes things a whole lot easier during a cat event. Make sure if you rent the equipment, or even if it's your own, that you have a good way of tracking the equipment and keeping up with the inventory per job, especially in cat events where security isn't so great. Um, and some rental companies have the equipment numbered, some don't. So make sure whatever your method is, whether it's just counting what goes in as it comes off the truck, etc., that you know what's on every job and that you can keep track of what comes off that job. So jumping into a cat loss situation unprepared could be pretty disastrous for yourself and for everyone else involved with you, your vendors and those that you are working for. However, with some good preparation and some good planning, cat work can actually be very rewarding and you could be the hero to those in need. So, are you ready? Thank you for listening to today's webinar. Again, I am Tabitha and I presented this on behalf of Scott Tarpley for the Crest Network. Should you have any questions about today's webinar, you feel free to reach out and we will answer them or get you any information that you need. The Crest Network is your only source for commercial restoration, education, support, and training. Thank you and have a great day.